I was standing in front of my mother's hospital bed when the doctor said a name I had never heard before. Not my father's name. Not the man who raised me. A stranger's name. And in that instant, I felt something inside me crack, because I understood that the life I thought I knew had been built on a lie so carefully protected that even now, with my mother barely breathing, it was still trying to stay hidden. I remember the smell of antiseptic, the low hum of machines, the way my hands started shaking before my mind could catch up. The doctor looked uncomfortable, like he had already said too much. He corrected himself quickly, but it was too late. That name was now lodged in my head, repeating itself over and over, demanding answers I wasn't ready to hear. I didn't confront my mother then. I couldn't. She looked fragile, smaller than I had ever seen her, and part of me was afraid that if I asked the question burning my chest, she would disappear before answering. Or worse, she would answer, and nothing would ever feel real again. But that moment was the beginning of everything unraveling. Growing up, I thought my family was complicated in the normal way. My father was distant, quiet, emotionally unavailable. He provided, he showed up to events when he had to, but there was always a wall between us. I used to tell myself he was just that type of man. Not cruel. Not abusive. Just absent, even when he was in the room. My mother, on the other hand, was warmth and tension mixed together. Loving, protective, but always anxious. There were things she never talked about. Questions she redirected. Stories about the past that somehow changed slightly every time they were told. I noticed it, even as a kid, but I learned quickly that pressing too hard made her retreat into silence. And there was something else. Something I never had words for until much later. A feeling that I didn't quite belong. That I was slightly out of place in my own home. Family photos where I looked like an extra. Relatives who would stare a second too long, then smile too wide. Comments like, "You don't look much like your father," followed by awkward laughter. At the time, I brushed it off. Families are weird. People say stupid things. That's what I told myself. But after the hospital incident, those memories started resurfacing, rearranging themselves into something darker. A few days later, I went back to my childhood home alone. My father was out of town, and my mother was still hospitalized. The house felt heavier than I remembered, like it was holding its breath. I walked through rooms filled with my past, every object suddenly suspicious, every silence too loud. I don't know what I was looking for at first. Proof, maybe. Or permission. Something that would either confirm my fear or put it to rest. I ended up in my mother's bedroom. Her closet was meticulously organized, just like always. Clothes by color, shoes aligned perfectly. Nothing out of place. It almost made me give up. Almost. But then I noticed a box on the top shelf, pushed far back, covered in a thin layer of dust. It didn't belong there. My mother hated dust. I pulled it down with shaking hands. Inside were old letters, tied together with a faded ribbon. The paper was yellowed, edges worn from being handled too many times. I recognized my mother's handwriting immediately. But the name at the top of the first letter was not my father's. It was the same name the doctor had said. My heart started pounding so hard I thought I might pass out. I sat on the bed and forced myself to read. The letters were intimate. Desperate. Full of longing and fear. They spoke of stolen moments, of a forbidden relationship that could never be made public. Of choices that would hurt everyone involved. And then, halfway through the stack, there was a sentence that made my vision blur. I don't know how to tell you that the baby is yours. I dropped the letters like they were burning my skin. In that moment, the world tilted. Every memory of my father, every argument, every cold interaction replayed itself in a new light. He wasn't distant because he didn't know how to love. He was distant because maybe, deep down, he knew. Or suspected. Or had been forced to accept something he never chose. I wanted to scream. I wanted to confront someone, anyone. But the house was silent, and the truth sat beside me, heavy and undeniable. The letters didn't end there. As I kept reading, the tone shifted. The man begged my mother to leave with him. She refused. She talked about fear, about consequences, about choosing stability over passion. She wrote about protecting the child. About creating a life where no one would ever know. And the final letter was the worst of all. "I'll stay away," he wrote. "But one day, they'll want to know who they are. And when that day comes, I hope you tell them the truth. Because secrets like this don't die. They wait." I couldn't breathe after that. I packed the letters back into the box, exactly as I found them. I didn't know why. Maybe part of me still wanted to pretend I hadn't seen them. That if I put them back, my life could return to what it was before. But that was impossible now. When my mother woke up enough to speak clearly, I visited her again. This time, I didn't let fear stop me. I sat beside her bed, held her hand, and asked the question I had been carrying my entire life without realizing it. Who is my real father? She closed her eyes immediately. Not in confusion. In surrender. Tears rolled down her temples, and I understood then that this secret had been eating her alive for decades. She whispered the same name I had read, the same name the doctor had accidentally revealed. And then she started talking, slowly at first, like each word hurt to say. She told me about her youth, about a love that felt dangerous and intoxicating. About a man who made her feel seen in a way my father never did. About fear, pressure, family expectations. She said she thought she was doing the right thing. She said she thought love would fade, that secrets could be buried deep enough. She was wrong. I asked her why she never told me. She looked at me with a mixture of guilt and terror and said she was afraid I would hate her. Afraid I would destroy everything by wanting more. Afraid I would leave. What she didn't understand was that not knowing had already done the damage. After that conversation, I couldn't look at my father the same way. Every interaction felt loaded. Every word unsaid felt louder than the one spoken. I started noticing the pain in his eyes, the bitterness he tried to hide. And I began to wonder if he had been a victim of this betrayal too, trapped in a life built on a hidden truth he never agreed to. The question that haunted me most wasn't who my real father was. It was whether I wanted to find him. Because once you uncover a family secret like this, you can't pretend it doesn't exist. And every part of me knew that whatever I chose next would change not just my life, but the lives of everyone connected to this dark past. The truth was no longer hidden. It was waiting for me to decide what to do with it. I didn't go looking for him right away. I told myself I needed time, that I had to process everything, but the truth was simpler and uglier. I was scared. Scared of what I might find. Scared of what it would say about me. Scared that once I crossed that line, there would be no way back to the life I had been living, even if it was built on a lie. Every day after that conversation with my mother felt heavier. I moved through my routine like a stranger in my own body. Conversations blurred. Food tasted like nothing. At night, I lay awake replaying memories, dissecting them, looking for clues I had missed. Moments when my father seemed to pull away. Times when my mother watched me with an intensity that felt almost apologetic. Family gatherings where certain people drank a little too much and avoided eye contact with me. The past was no longer quiet. It was screaming. My mother tried to act normal once she came home, but the silence between us had changed shape. It wasn't ignorance anymore. It was loaded. She wanted to move on, to believe that confession alone had erased the damage. I could see it in the way she cooked my favorite meals, asked about my day, touched my arm when she spoke. Love mixed with fear. Guilt disguised as care. My father, however, became harder to be around. Not because he did anything differently, but because I did. Every time he laughed, I wondered if it was real. Every time he gave me advice, I questioned whether he felt entitled to. I hated myself for these thoughts, but I couldn't stop them. The bond one thought we shared now felt borrowed, like something I had been allowed to use without permission. One night, after a particularly tense dinner, I found him sitting alone on the porch, staring into the dark. I almost said something. Almost asked if he knew. Almost told him everything. But the words stayed trapped in my throat. There are truths that feel too big to release, because once spoken, they destroy more than silence ever could. That night, I finally made the decision. I was going to find him. Not because I wanted a new father. Not because I expected a happy ending. But because I couldn't live with the question anymore. I needed to look this hidden truth in the eye, even if it shattered whatever piece I had left. The letters gave me a starting point. A city. A workplace mentioned in passing. A few fragments of a life my mother had tried to erase. It took days of searching, cross-checking old records, social media profiles that hadn't been updated in years. Every click made my pulse spike. Every possibility felt like standing on the edge of a cliff. And then I found him. His face stopped me cold. There was no denying it. The shape of his eyes. The curve of his mouth. The way his brow naturally frowned, just like mine did when I was thinking too hard. It was like looking at an older version of myself, frozen in time. My stomach twisted, not with joy, but with something far more complicated. Recognition without relationship. Blood without memory. I stared at that photo longer than I cared to admit. He had a life. A visible one. A career. Friends. A family. A woman standing beside him in most pictures. Children who smiled with the same ease I never had. The realization hit me harder than I expected. I wasn't just uncovering my own dark past. I was standing at the edge of someone else's. I told myself I wouldn't interfere. That I would just know. That knowledge alone would be enough. It wasn't. A week later, I sent him a message. It was short. Neutral. Carefully worded. I didn't accuse. I didn't explain. I just said there was something important I needed to talk to him about, something from many years ago involving my mother. He didn't respond right away. Those hours stretched endlessly. I imagined him reading it, dismissing it, panicking, showing it to his wife, deleting it. I imagined rejection so vividly that when my phone finally buzzed, my hands were numb. He agreed to meet. We chose a quiet cafe halfway between our cities. Neutral ground. Safe. Or so I thought. I arrived early and sat where I could see the door. My heart pounded so loudly I was sure people could hear it. Every man who walked in made my breath catch. Then he entered. Time slowed in a way I had only experienced in nightmares. He scanned the room, uncertain, until his eyes landed on me. And in that second, I saw it. Recognition. Shock. Fear. All of it flickered across his face before he masked it with politeness. He knew. We sat down, exchanged awkward greetings. Small talk that felt obscene given the weight between us. Finally, I couldn't take it anymore. I told him who my mother was. His face drained of color. He didn't deny it. He didn't ask why I was there. He closed his eyes, took a long breath, and said my name like it was something fragile. He told me he had wondered for years. That he had done the math. That he had asked my mother once and accepted her silence as an answer. He said staying away was the hardest thing he had ever done. Hearing that didn't bring relief. It brought anger. Anger that choices had been made for me before I ever had a voice. Anger that love had been prioritized over truth. Anger that everyone involved had decided what was best for me without asking. We talked for hours. About his life. About mine. About everything and nothing. He apologized, more than once, but I didn't know how to accept it. Apologies don't rewrite childhoods. They don't fill empty spaces. They don't erase the feeling of growing up slightly misaligned with your own reflection. When I left that cafe, I felt hollow. Meeting him didn't complete me. It complicated me. The weeks that followed were some of the hardest of my life. I was carrying too many truths, each one pulling me in a different direction. My mother wanted me to keep this between us. My biological father wanted to be careful, to protect his family. My father, the man who raised me, remained unaware, living in a reality that felt increasingly cruel. And I was stuck in the middle, trying to decide who I was allowed to be now that the foundation of my identity had shifted. The breaking point came unexpectedly. My father found the letters. I don't know how. Maybe my mother grew careless. Maybe part of her wanted to be exposed. But one evening, I came home to find him sitting at the kitchen table, the box open in front of him, his hands trembling. He looked older in that moment. Smaller. He didn't yell. He didn't cry. He asked one question, quietly. Is it true? I nodded. The silence that followed was unbearable. Decades of loyalty, sacrifice, and suppressed suspicion collapsed into that single moment. He told me he had always felt something was off. That he had tried to love me without resentment, but sometimes failed. That knowing didn't hurt as much as never being given a choice. That was the moment I realized betrayal doesn't just belong to the person who cheats. It echoes outward, touching everyone in its path. Nothing went back to normal after that. It couldn't. But something honest finally began. Time passed. Slowly. Painfully. Relationships shifted, redefined themselves, some growing closer, others creating distance that felt necessary. I stayed in touch with my biological father, cautiously, without expectations. I rebuilt my relationship with the man who raised me, not as a replacement, but as something chosen, not assumed. And somewhere along the way, I started to understand that identity isn't just about blood. It's about truth. About facing the parts of your story that make you uncomfortable instead of burying them. Finding out who my real father was didn't give me answers the way I expected. It gave me better questions. Questions about honesty, loyalty, and the cost of silence. Questions about how many families are held together by secrets no one wants to name. Questions about how many people are walking around feeling incomplete without knowing why. If you're still listening to this, maybe part of this story touched something in you. Maybe you've felt that quiet sense of not fully belonging. Maybe you've lived with questions no one ever answered honestly. Stories like mine are more common than people admit, hidden behind smiles, traditions, and carefully maintained appearances. If this story made you reflect, if it stirred something uncomfortable or familiar, take a moment. Like this video. Subscribe to the channel. Share your thoughts in the comments. I read them, and sometimes, knowing you're not alone is the first step toward facing your own hidden truths. Because secrets don't disappear. They wait. And when they finally surface, the only real choice we have is whether we look away, or listen.